Hi, WFMers out there. I'm your host, Irina, and this is WFM Unfiltered, a podcast by Right WFM, the place where we share the truth about workforce management. So get comfortable and listen closely. Hi everyone, welcome to WFM Unfiltered. I'm your host Irina, and I hope you had a fantastic weekend and you're very well rested because I have a great guest today for you. And with that, without further ado, Danny, I'm so happy to finally be talking to you. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Irina, and thank you for having me on for my first ever podcast appearance. I am honoured.
I won you. I'm so happy about it. You cannot imagine. But before we start giving some tips and tricks on different topics, can you please introduce yourself?
My name's Danny Green. I'm Angry Water, so water utilities company in the UK. Currently learning and development business partner. However, most of my career has been around sales and contact center environment. So that's what I'm passionate about. Leadership's what I'm passionate about, and coaching and mentoring. So no doubt we'll get into some of that today.
Absolutely. You know what? Let's start from scratch. Tell me about the early career, about the salesy part that I really liked when we were talking about.
Okay, so I won't go through it line by line because I know I probably don't look it, but I've been working for over 20 years, right? So I kicked off with various odd jobs leaving school, from labouring on the building site to working in factories, that sort of stuff. And that's when I realised hands-on work absolutely wasn't for me. So I got into sales. My older brother was in sales. He was earning decent money. And I thought, you know what? I think I want a piece of pie. I realised fairly early on that I was pretty good at sales and I could get people to buy things from me. And I moved around various organisations back in the day because that's what you did back in the 2000s. You could move around and that was the done thing. So I did that for a little while, and then I started managing telesales offices at around 19, 20 years old. I was a fairly young manager, I'd say. Definitely made some mistakes, definitely made some learnings along the way to shape my career that it is now. I also had a stint as a duty manager for high street bookmakers for a period of time. And then I realised I wanted to get into customer service. So I wanted to try and get some hours back in my home life, because when you're working in sales and when you're working for a bookmaker, you don't necessarily get those hours back. And then I started with my local water company 13 years ago. Started on the front line as a contact centre agent in the billing department, showed that I was very capable of doing that job, and got my first opportunity to start supporting my colleagues in a floor walking capacity relatively quickly, if truth be told. My boss at that time spoke to the person who was looking after the new starters coming into the contact centre to see if I could work with him as a mentor. And quite honestly, his first reaction was, "You've got to be kidding me." So bearing in mind, I'd come from probably 8 or so years in sales to come in here and smashing the targets out of the park. I probably was one of those giving it a bit of the big un and probably coming across as a bit arrogant, if I'm honest. But do you know what? Once I got working with him, we absolutely hit it off straight away. The, the great thing working with him was he taught me his principles of coaching, many of which I still use today. And then he went on sabbatical. So I got my first opportunity to step up into a team leader role within the billing contact centre. I did that for around 4 years. And then my boss was retiring. So he had the confidence in me that I'd be able to step up and do his job. I had the confidence and belief, as you do as a previous salesperson, but I didn't get it. So I applied for it, I interviewed for it, and I absolutely flopped the interview. Afterwards, though, I sat down with the hiring manager after the decision. I had a really, really good chat with him and realised that, do you know what? If I want to grow professionally, I've got to step outside of my comfort zone. I've got to do something I'm not comfortable with. So then I joined the Operational Management Centre, which is our 24/7 critical contact centre, and started leading on all things related to that contact centre. I built up a great network. I built up relationships with our field operations team, the resource and planning teams, internal senior leaders. And then a couple of years into that, the role was created as a contact center manager, and I was successful during interview and became responsible for the contact center as well as two other proactive teams. So I had circa 80 FTE and 6 managers at that point. And the rest is history, they say. But do you know what? It probably is worth mentioning as well, Irina, that I wouldn't have been able to do any of what I've done if it wasn't without the support of my wife, who put her career on hold, enabled me to go out, push myself, and build my career while she stayed at home to bring up our children. So, yeah, I had a great support network at home that's allowed me to do the things I've done today.
I think at this point, I don't know what to say. First of all, thank you for getting us on your journey. But second of all, I don't think ever anyone has given a public shout out on the show for their significant other. So, wow. I mean, thank you so much on behalf of all of women that are probably staying home and are taking care of the children and of the house and of everything. So I think it was a great shout out. So thank you. Great of you to do that. Um, you mentioned a couple of things that really piqued my interest to go in different directions about this conversation. But one of which is, I have said that many, many times. I'm notoriously bad in interviews. Like I suck, like I thank them so fast, like I can't get out of that. So I know that a lot of folks from WFM really resent the interview process as such. So you spoke about confidence part, and I feel like our profile might be a bit lacking confidence in terms of interviews, at least. So, what do you have any coaching tips, tricks, how to not tank interviews right from the get go?
Do you know what, Irina? I'm probably fairly similar to you in the fact that I absolutely hate interviews. Like going for a job interview scares the absolute life out of me. And when I speak to people now about that, they say, "But you're a senior. You're a senior manager. You've employed hundreds of people in your career into different roles, into management roles, into frontline roles, into technical roles, into analytical roles. So I have interviewed hundreds of people. I know exactly what I'm looking for as an interviewer.
Yep.
I can't necessarily practice what I preach when I'm on the opposite side of the table. But I can talk a good game. If someone comes to me for interview help, I can talk them through what it is they need to do. It's then being able to do that when I'm on the other side of the table. So I don't know. I think for me, the interview process is probably still a little outdated. We're still doing the same thing now that we did 40 years ago. We're bringing people into a room, putting them in a really uncomfortable situation, asking them questions off the hook that they don't know what we're going to ask. So they're on the back foot straight away. And it just feels really, really old school. One thing that we've started doing at Anglia Water probably only about 9-12 months ago is we started sending over to the applicants some of the questions we're going to ask in the interview.
Oh,
So it gives them the opportunity to prepare for at least 2 or 3 of the questions so they can feel a bit more relaxed. As an interviewer, I always try and make I'm probably more on the informal side than I am the formal. So I
yeah.
try and make it a conversation. I try to make it a place where someone can be comfortable, where they can be themselves. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice I'd give anyone is don't try and be someone you think they want to see, because that won't showcase your best skills. Just be yourself. Ultimately, your CV's got you in the door, so your experience speaks volumes. Now you've got to go and show them your personality, because personalities really do matter.
No, I absolutely fully agree with this one. I have noticed that sometimes we're getting so stressed that we go blank and we block, and we can't really show that personality that might be the differentiator between the different candidates and what they're actually looking for. Because if they have invited you already for interview, they have probably checked your resume and they ticked off that you do have the experience. So yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
Okay, shall we talk 24/7 then? Contact
let's go.
centers. Okay,
Yeah.
what do we do with them? one of the things that, we're often ending up in, especially if you're not having different outsourcers party, but you run your in-house 24/7, ultimately the staffing is probably lower, right? During the evenings and during those hours, midnight until early morning. So, one thing that I was always curious about, if you have people that are primarily getting those shifts, how the hell are you coaching them? Because it does seem to me like they're being on the disadvantage part of not being there when the majority of staffing is there. So, first, they have nobody to necessarily learn from. But second of all, most of the team leads and coaches and the staff is working during the day. So, for me, I'm quite interested in the quality after the busiest hours.
Yeah. So I'll give you a bit of a history on how we operate. So
Mm.
the contact center that I was running is 24/7. It's a critical element of our operation. So for customers who are experiencing operational issues, they can have no water, they may have sewage flooding into the property. It's really, really critical stuff. So we have to man 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So we have our day team who work from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then we have our night agent team who just do night shifts. So they will pick up the baton from around 8:15 to 9:30, Monday to Sunday. And then they'll work through till sort of 7 a.m. The following day. Um, I think I was probably really, really fortunate. I had a great group of managers working for me. And what they did is that they tried to be on shift either late on at night so that they were picking the coaching and one-to-ones up with their night agents at the very beginning of their shift, or they would start very early in the morning to pick them up at the back end of their shift so that they were able to make sure that they were getting in the support required for their agents. If they didn't manage to catch them at the back end or at the beginning of the shift, what they would do is work with the agent to get them in at a time that was convenient for them during the day when they're on standby, potentially.
That's interesting. From my perspective, team leads are, I mean, not from my perspective, from my experience, usually team leads like to stick to their shifts during the day. And more often, they would be asking the agents or the advisors to come earlier, which can kind of mess up our staffing because, we need them in the evening for a certain reasons. If you ask them to come
Yeah.
earlier, then you have to compensate their hours from when we need them to actually be at work. But you
Yeah.
said something about coaching tips in the beginning of our conversation that you're still using. We can't go without giving us a little bit of that.
So I think for me, when I was coaching pre-Anglian water, when I was coaching salespeople, I was probably I wasn't listening to understand. What I was doing is listening to answer. So they were talking to me, but I already had the answer in the back of my head because I knew what I wanted salespeople to do. I needed them to sell. So ultimately, I knew everything. I was the expert. So when I was coaching, it was more about what I could tell them, what I could get them to do. When I started working with my account with the team leader, when I started here around coaching, he really taught me the skill of active listening. So the skill of actually listening to what's going on in the conversation between the agent and between the customer, this asking really great open questions to the person that you're coaching, but then listening to their answer and working with them to make sure that you're getting them to a place where they're comfortable. Because it isn't about, for me, it isn't about guiding people to where you think they need to be. It's about them finding their path to where they want to be. That's the skill in coaching for me.
If I'm understanding you correctly, when let's say that you are asking a question in terms to check someone's knowledge, right? You're already going from the position, I know the answer, I'm just waiting for you to tell me that answer and to evaluate you based on that. But if you start focusing on their thought process and how they're actually, what is behind their answer, then you can adapt your coaching strategy. Oh, that's really cool one. That's
Absolutely,
really
I
cool.
think it's really easy just to ask questions to get people to where you want them to be. That's really easy, but that won't change behaviour. you have to understand what process is behind the reason that they've said what they've said. If you can get to that, that's coaching on a completely different level. That's helping them understand how they improve rather than telling them how they can improve.
But isn't that the same thing that applies to interview process? Basically, this is why we think a lot of us fail because the interviewer or the recruiter already comes with, oh, if I hear that word and if I hear that answer, that's a tick. So this candidate is proceeding to the next level. But if they focus and they start understanding, okay, they actually know their stuff, but they're stressed as right now on the conversation, then it's a completely different ballgame.
Absolutely. And do you know what, Irina? What I then started doing as an interviewer is I put my coach hat on. So actually, what I was doing is asking the question, giving some context, listening to what they had to say, and then asking more questions. So digging deeper to understand actually you're giving me some really great information here, but I know there's more that you can give me. So then I start prompting to get more out of them. That opens up a different conversation. That opens up another level of confidence because they're talking. They know they're getting some great stuff out. So it makes them actually settle down. The nerves start to dissipate a little bit.
Oh, that's a great one. Now you have to tell me more. Now you get me hooked on. Give me more tips.
Which tips do you want? Interviewing or
No, not the interviewing one, the coaching ones. Because tell you what, one thing that we're really missing on in WFM teams is that we don't get trained soft skills. We basically, if we do get any sort of training, we'll be training on the tasks as such. So we're missing on all of the goodies that trainers and coaches and agents are getting. So any kind of tips and advice that you can provide me is something that we can apply to our teams because we're not getting any.
Absolutely. I think for me, it's understanding what the individual wants to get out of the session before you even begin. Because again, I could go in there thinking this person needs to enhance X, Y, or Z, but actually, if they don't want to enhance that and they have a different goal, then you'll switch them off straight away if you're focusing on something they don't want to focus on. So for me, kicking off every session with, so what is it you want to get out of today? And how can I help you get there? So it's finding out from them what they want to achieve and then how you can help them. And then just some great, really great open questions to start opening up that conversation and digging deeper to understand. So what is it behind that goal? Why do they think they need to enhance on that element of their work?
How would that apply to, let's say, monthly one-to-ones and scorecards and those type of evaluation sessions? Because usually from those evaluations, you do have to provide feedback on performance, right? This is where you stand. Where do you think you stand? How can we get you across the board and so on? But how do you set it up in the best way for the person?
So I think they're two different things for me. So the one-to-one conversation and the coaching were always separate. So I always had monthly one-to-ones where we discussed the performance, we just discussed how they were doing, we discussed them as a person. So how are you really doing as a person, not just an employee? Because one of the biggest things for me to get people on board was building that level of trust with them. You can't build trust if you set a professional boundary that they can't bring their home life into work. So I always wanted to understand the person, understand what is it behind that person that makes them tick. So it really helps them in the coaching because then if you found out a bit more about their work history, their home life, you could start bringing that into the coaching. So if someone worked at Burger King, for example, pre Anglia Mortar, I would bring analogies in from Burger King. So when you were at Burger King and you were doing X, Y, and Z, how would you have done this task? What would you have done in this situation? So you were able to put them back in a place where they were comfortable at the same time as helping them reflect on the performance that they're currently doing.
That's so interesting because do you know what happened to me? I've been in a situation where my manager was completely forbidding me to speak with people about anything outside of tasks, like nothing personal, no references. And I was like, how do I connect to people? Like I just sit and stare at them and look like I don't know what. Like, how do I connect?
That's
Okay.
not a that's not a relationship, is it? How can you build a professional relationship with someone if you're only ever talking about the task in hand? It
Mm-hmm.
makes no sense. To me, it makes no sense because you have to understand someone to be able to build the trust that you absolutely need when you're working with someone, and to be able to coach effectively, you have to understand what makes that person tick to a degree. Not you don't have to be fully in, but you need to understand the individual.
Yeah, you know what? I'm starting to think, is there any way at all for our profile of WFM people that are mostly introverts, maybe occasional extroverts, kind of suffering from a huge imposter syndrome, like 99% of the time, is it possible to develop salesy qualities so we can start selling our story better to get that confidence to present ourselves better to senior management? How do we get there?
Do you know what? It's difficult, isn't it? Because ultimately everybody's different and everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And generally, an introvert's weakness will be that they don't believe in themselves or they don't want to publicly put themselves on show. Um, but you will have some introverts who are absolutely fantastic at it because what they do is, and I can't, someone said this the other day, it might have even been you, Irina, or I've seen it on LinkedIn relating to they put themselves into their alter ego. So they pretend they're someone else when they're in a situation they're not comfortable with, because
Oh,
that's the only way they can get themselves across in a positive, professional way. I can't remember who it was now, but I saw it was on LinkedIn only this last week. So it's about becoming your alter ego. That's one element to do it. The other element, though, for me is as a WFM specialist, that person is the expert in the room. So another great piece of advice that I got from one of my colleagues only a couple of weeks ago and was having a conversation about presenting is if you think you are the expert in the room, you will automatically be a bit more comfortable in that situation because you know everything that there is to know about what you're going to say. It's unlikely that there's someone else in the room that's going to have the same level of knowledge about your job that you do.
okay, so I think that explains those insecurities that we're sometimes feeling when we're going to present our story, is because we start to stress, what if I can't reply to this question? What if I can't reply to this question? What if I don't know that information? It almost feels like you're going to an exam where you
Yeah,
haven't fully prepared to, and
yeah,
then you're
yeah.
just think that the teacher is going to ask the question that you have gone over.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's not just related to introverts. So on all personality quizzes that I've ever done, I've come out as an extrovert. I've come out as this real red energy person. And that is generally how I operate. So in most situations, I am a competitive driver. I am an extrovert. But you tell me that I'm going to be presenting. You tell me that I'm going to be sat in an interview. You tell me that I'm going to be sat on my first ever podcast. Imposter syndrome comes over me as a senior leader, and as an extrovert. I still get that I'm a human being. People have feelings, right? It's how you deal with those, and sometimes. And I've given this piece of advice so many times and not listened to it myself. Growth comes from pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And that's why I agreed to do your podcast because actually this is outside of my comfort zone. Even as an extrovert, I sat there thinking, well, why would people want to listen to me?
It's a great one, isn't it? And I'm fully like you. And people probably won't believe me because by now I'm doing quite a lot of podcasts. I have my own podcast. I have presented in front of hundreds of people live. And every single time I'm like, sweating, like shivering, thinking, oh my God, like they are gonna see it from me and they'll think I'm stupid and I'm gonna forget any single word of English that I know in my head. And I'm just gonna stand there staring at them and walk out. And then I started thinking, I'm not that important for people to live their lives, even if I screw up thinking constantly about me. So they're probably gonna have a laugh or two and they're gonna go home and come completely forget about me. And at the moment I start thinking in this way, it's what helps me go to a session. And you know what? If I screw up, well, I use it as a lesson for everyone that you can screw up and then keep on doing it because it pushes you out of your comfort zone and it teaches you, okay, be in that situation and it does get better, to be honest.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
does get.
Absolutely, and that, do you know what, it is just a shift of mindset, and that's what people have to do. You have to be able to shift your mindset away from the negative feeling that you are feeling, that you're going to screw up, that you're going to get it wrong. Because actually, the more positive you are about it, it's going to be okay. I'm going to get through it. I'm going to walk off the stage. I'm going to walk out of the room after, and I'll be absolutely fine. You start putting those thoughts in your mind, and it'll just be a better experience.
Absolutely. You know what? I actually am thinking about that. You know that that advice like fake it until you make it. And then you should basically project confidence and people will automatically start feeling differently about you. But I was wondering lately, quite the opposite. If you have to present, let's say in front of group of people, is it better to be really confident than to wing it, for the lack of better word? Or you should say, oh, I'm a bit nervous for that meeting today to present in front of you. So what do you think would be better approach? To be honest about how you feel or to be confident? Oh,
I think for me, it's always about being your authentic self. So if you're feeling nervous, I don't think there's anything wrong with letting people know. Do you know what? I'm feeling a bit nervous. If you're confident, brilliant. Crack on, do what you need to do, and just do it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being a bit vulnerable. It shows that you're human, and I guarantee you now, 50% or more of people that you're presenting to will be feeling exactly the same as you if they were stood in your position. So you'd have the empathy of the room.
yeah. You know what? That reminds me of one story with one guy that I used to work with. And he is a salesy guy and he's brilliant at his job. And he's like, sometimes you salesy people cannot shut up. Like he can just talk and talk and talk. So he started working with me and he would automatically just talk. And I couldn't even comprehend the amount of information that he was throwing to different people in meetings. And I was like, Jesus, how are you doing it? Are you always that confident? He was like, I have the biggest imposter syndrome ever. I think I don't know anything. It's just this way he just doesn't show it. You know what? But in his head, it's not the story that all of us are seeing in the room, and it's so interesting to understand that.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have one last question for you, and I'm gonna let you go. And maybe a little bit side topic, but lately I'm thinking a lot about how WFMers are presenting themselves and presenting information. And one thing that I have done for many years in my career is when we had to conduct a PowerPoint presentation or whatever to an audience, you over prepare to the point that you actually write down a script, you memorize it in your head, and then you are in front of people, and then unfortunately, sometimes you get so stressed that that whole script goes blank, and then you are really, uh, uh, uh. So I was just wondering, in terms of presentation, is it better to get that overly prepared? Or how do we wing it if we're so stressed that we know that something will happen?
Do you know what, Irina? I've always been that person that gets stressed about presenting. And I've done both things. So when I flopped that interview all those years ago, and I'm talking 10 years ago now, something like that. Part of it was a presentation. Um, I spent the last day of my holiday preparing for that presentation. I went over it and over it and over it and over it to the point where I knew every word, but then I couldn't get it out when I was in the interview. And one of the pieces of advice I got from the hiring manager afterwards was, you prepared so much for that interview that it was at your detriment. So actually, knowing the topics that you're going to present, having some cue cards with bullet points on of information, and not presenting too much on the slide is, for me, the best way forward. So you have some key information on the slide, you've got more on your cue cards, go from there. That would just be my personal view, because the more information you put on your slide, the more information people are looking at and likely to question you about, but also it's more information that you've got to talk through. If you have less information and you skip a little bit of your pitch or whatever it is, it doesn't matter because no one's expecting you to say it anyway.
That's a good one. Yeah, I'm always looking from the same perspective that I used to put highlights on my presentations, but I would write down my story, like complete story, as if I'm talking to you. It would be scripted, and I
Yeah,
would be getting showers and going through that same story. I would be going to the meeting, getting through the story, and then at the moment I have to present, it's like, good morning, and I have nothing because I get so
yeah,
stressed. I feel like it's a lot of people, especially in WFM, it's something that we actually don't talk about. And we see some people presenting, and we're like, how the hell are they doing it? They're so brilliant. And those same people are like, I'm sweating, like my blood pressure is up. I need to lay
yeah,
down now, otherwise I'm going to faint. So, what I started doing is, again, understanding that I'm that vulnerable person having imposter syndrome, and it's possible that I might make mistakes or two, which I'm gonna address. But ultimately, nobody's gonna spend their entire life thinking about my one screw up, have there be
yeah,
any on a presentation. And then you prepare to the most of your abilities, and ultimately, whatever happens.
yeah, absolutely.
So, thank you so much, Danny, for this conversation and for all of these tips. As I said, I'm always looking for information. How can we better ourselves? Because in WFM, it's like we're on our own. So when we are exposed to leaders like you, it can make a whole lot of difference. So thank you so much for this conversation.
No worries. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. And chat soon. And for everyone listening to us, stay tuned for the next one. Bye bye.
Thanks, Irina.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Irina Mateva, founder of Right WFM, where we believe that every business and its people are unique and deserve the right solution to their challenges. If you need support with workforce management, we're just a message away. Get in touch at Irina at rightwfm.com or info at rightwfm.com. If you like the content and would like to support the show, please subscribe to WFM Unfiltered on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review, and follow me on LinkedIn. You can also show some love to our great sponsors. For more information about them, check out the episode notes. This is your place for real WFM, so to suggest guests or topics, get in touch at Irina at rightwfm.com. See ya! Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Irina Mateva, founder of Right WFM, where we believe that every business and its people are unique and deserve the right solution to their challenges. If you need support with workforce management, we're just a message away. Get in touch at Irina at rightwfm.com or info at rightwfm.com. If you like the content and would like to support the show, please subscribe to WFM Unfiltered on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review, and follow me on LinkedIn. You can also show some love to our great sponsors. For more information about them, check out the episode notes. This is your place for real WFM, so to suggest guests or topics, get in touch at Irina at rightwfm.com. See ya!